Hello, you are listening to the Divorce University online podcast with your hosts, Thomas and Tammy Ferreira.
Hi, I'm Tammy.
And I'm Thomas.
And we are back. And today we're talking about, are you a perfectionist in your child custody case?
Right.
Or are you a perfectionist in your child custody
In your
case?
child custody case.
I mean, I think this kind of goes along with, like, are you a perfectionist in your parenting? And I know when I was younger, I was very guilty of that.
Tammy is a perfectionist in just about everything.
I am just about, yeah. I've tried to get better as I've gotten older.
That's why she married me.
Yeah. Well, you were the perfect choice for me.
Yes.
You're not the perfect choice for everyone.
No, probably not for most, actually. All right. So my observation on this point is that the ideal, I mean, I'm old-fashioned, but the ideal is to have both parents living in a house or a home, and the kids have their own room, and there's enough money for everybody, and there's food, and we're providing a roof over their head, and the parents get along fine, and each one of them learns from you how to be in the future, to have a relationship. So they're modeling, they're looking at you, and they're learning how to relate to their future husband or wife.
Well, I don't think anybody has a baby and thinks, "Oh, let me have a child so I can co-parent with my ex." Right? That's just not. I don't think that's how any of us envision it.
Right. But that's the expectation in a warped way. The tendency is to expect that you can have it perfect right out of the gate. Okay, you split up, you've got separate residence, and you're suddenly in a co-parenting relationship, but you still have to have the perfect house and the perfect setup, and ideally that other parent is going quietly into that good night, and the kids like you more than they like him or her.
Right. Well, there you go. There's the ideal of what we all dream of.
Right.
But and it improves over time. I mean, you and I have had that experience, not only ourselves, but with hundreds of clients, that it does improve over time. And, but it's never perfect. Even as good as it is now, it's never perfect. And I mean, no family is perfect, but I'm just saying it's not. Even now, you're divorced from your ex-wife. You have a really good co-parenting relationship. Your kids are 17 and 18. You're sort of closing in on the home stretch. But even now, in many ways, having two separate homes creates a lot of difficulty just in the day-to-day parenting. Because day-to-day parenting, you don't agree even when you're living in the same home, let alone once you have two worlds you're managing.
Because when my son is at his mother's house, who's going to produce the podcast?
Yeah. Or, it's really hard to get to a level where you have the kind of cooperation where the child, receives a punishment in one world and that punishment is carried over into the second world. And, we're pretty close to that at this point with your ex-wife. But I would say that's just, it's fairly rare for most people.
Right. Well, I had a court once say to me, Judge Brannigan,
Joseph Brannigan.
Brannigan. I couldn't remember the second half of his name. He recently retired.
He did.
And he was the judge in my divorce case. And he said to me, Mr. Ferreira, this is when I was saying that I basically told the court, look, this co-parenting relationship is having a negative effect on one of our children because he's really angry. And he said to me, Mr. Ferreira, we have no fault divorce in California, but not no consequence divorce.
Right. Well, no consequence divorce doesn't exist for anybody, right?
Yeah. And really kind of the thing that made me think of this topic, we have certain couples, when Tammy and I do mediation. We've done hundreds of mediations. We've seen so many different situations. But sometimes we have this couple come in and they both want everything.
Right.
So they want to keep the marital residence,
Right.
and we hear this thing, well, can we agree that that we'll keep the marital residence in joint tenancy until Johnny, who's 2 years old, graduates from high school? And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we see this a lot from
Yeah.
people in the very beginning. Even in cases where it's pretty severe litigation, we inevitably, the first couple conversations with a new client frequently involve, things like, well, we're going to try to keep the kids in the home, and we're going to, we're going to continue to hold it in joint tenancy, and we're going to keep all these things joint, and we're going to try to not disrupt the kids and all this kind of stuff. And the fact of the matter is that can do more harm than good the vast majority of the time.
Right. Because you're getting a divorce for a reason.
Right.
I've seen couples try to stay in business together.
Right.
Okay, they for the last 10, and this is our situation, Tammy, right? You and me. If we
Well,
were,
fortunately, we're not getting divorced.
Yeah,
at
never.
least not yet.
yeah, she'll hunt me down and kill me. That's what'll happen. So, but the couple wants to stay in business together. They've built this business, and now they're getting a divorce. And usually one of the parties is kind of the expert. So they're the ones that, like for example, if an insurance business, usually the husband or the wife has experience in insurance, has been doing this for a long time.
Right.
And so they think, well, she's got half the brain. We need to stay in business together.
Right.
But you can't. But the problem is that's too much togetherness.
Well, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, if you're to the point where you're getting a divorce because you can't manage your day-to-day interactions without having conflict, then how in the world are you going to manage something bigger like a business?
Right.
Or continuing to hold the family home, which involves, financial
Right.
consequences for both parties. And this is a lot of what we see is it's almost like people come in and it's like they want a divorce where they don't have to deal with each other, but they don't want a divorce in that they want all of the pieces of their lives to remain attached.
Right. Yeah.
And the problem with this is really the biggest impact on this is the child, to me,
Right.
if you have children. I mean, if I say this a lot when we talk about this, and I'm not to say that if you don't have children that divorce isn't painful or difficult or whatever. It is. The only difference is it ends when it ends if you don't have children, and you can move on and essentially never see that person again if that's what you
Right.
choose. If you have children, you are never
Yeah.
free. I've been divorced for 16, 17 years, and talked to my ex-husband a few weeks ago. Like you're
Yeah.
just you're never
Never
free.
completely free.
You're never completely free.
But you can be free.
I mean, I'm free
Yeah.
emotionally at this point, yes, but I'm not free in the sense that it's not like I never have to talk to him again. And inevitably a conversation comes up and it kind of goes, "Oh, this is why I divorced that person." It reminds you. But essentially what we're in that phase of when we're first separating or going through a divorce is this idea that, the most important thing is to keep from disrupting the children in any way. And so to do that, we're going to try to hold on to all these different pieces
Right.
with the idea that we're not going to disrupt the children. And the problem with that is the reason you're getting divorced usually is because you've come to a point where you're having so much conflict in front of the children that you recognize that conflict is doing more damage than you being apart would do.
Well, I have a comment about that, and it's going to be kind of shocking for a lot of you out there. But in my opinion, the best thing you can give your kids, in most cases, I would say probably in every case, but the biggest gift you can give them is a clean break.
Yeah. Well, and that's where I was going is if you're continuing to try to hold these pieces together, then you're continuing to have points that are going to result in conflict.
Right.
And that's the very thing that you're trying to eliminate that's doing damage to the children. I will promise you that the conflict you're having over different things is way worse than them having to live in a different place or switch schools or, any of the things that we worry about or fear.
Well, I guess the point is I'm trying to create like a hierarchy of values.
Right.
And if at the top of that hierarchy is not disrupting the children, then what's got to be above that is the conditions to not disrupt them, and that is a clean break where there are very rigid boundaries between the two homes.
I understand that. And what
Yeah.
I'm trying to do is fill in the nuts and bolts pieces of why do you need that philosophy? Why do you need that hierarchy just because Thomas D. Ferreira says so?
No, because
That's the part I'm trying to fill in. Is like the
no,
day-to-day explanation of why that
no,
needs to be the outcome.
because it is in the best interest of your children to separate the world in most cases.
Why?
And the reason is because you have conflict around, where there's togetherness, there's conflict.
That's exactly what I just said.
So it
right.
gives you the opportunity to have arguments, and literally the relationship will bleed into your co-parenting relationship.
That's right.
So the kids can tell
Right.
that, that you're on edge.
Right.
I remember when we had therapy sessions with my young children when I was going through my divorce. And I remember one time we took the kids to therapy, and my ex-wife was sitting in the waiting room with me.
Right.
And you could have cut the tension with a knife. I mean, it was just, oh my goodness. And she was mad.
Yeah.
And I was mad.
Right. And that's what I'm saying is like, if you're trying to maintain all these different points, then, and we actually had this conversation with a client recently. It's like, if you want to maintain all these different points, what that's called is don't separate or don't get a divorce. Stay together. Right. But if you've come to the point where you can't manage staying together because of the level of conflict, then you've got to be able to let go of these other pieces, because ultimately, though the pieces people are trying to hang on to are things.
Right.
They're the house and the business and the money and all the things. But what those things do is create conflict, which creates emotional damage to your kids because the parents are having conflict. And so really, when people are saying things like, oh, I want to keep the family home because it's important to keep the kids stable, it's not important to keep, okay, the family home is not the thing that keeps the kids stable. A building is not what keeps the kids stable. Your emotional stability and your emotional interaction with the other parent is what keeps the kids stable.
Right. I would say that you're right, that the best resolution in not, and people come into mediation and they say, we want to keep the family home, or
right.
I want to do a buyout or whatever. And usually at some point in the process, they tumble to the fact that it's a better idea to sell and divide.
Right.
Sell and divide's a really good resolution because, number one, you don't have the asset anymore, so you're not subjected to the fluctuations of the marketplace. Number two, that marital residence, it's holding you back.
Yeah.
Because you need to move on. What parents need in these situations is to move on with their lives.
Well, and what the child needs is a signal that it's different now. This isn't the same, because you're in the family home, everything's the same. Only one parent can be in the home, right? So everybody thinks, oh, everything's the same for the kids and all that. No, it's not. The other parent's not there. And so it's not the same either way. And I think it's best when everybody has just that clean break, that's sort of that emotional reset that says, okay, this is going to look different, but that's okay.
Right.
And I think we let our own fears about change,
right.
stop us from that. And, if you could do anything for your child, one of the best things that you could possibly do would be to teach them not to fear change, because life is change.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's scary. And sometimes it comes expectedly and sometimes it comes totally unexpectedly. But the only constant in your entire life is continuous change.
Right. And particularly if you're the leaving spouse, you need to expect that things are going to be different going forward.
Right.
There's not, even if both of you are working, you're going to lose an economy of scale that was created by the ability to live together. You're going to need two residences.
Right.
And I personally believe that it's better to have a happy relationship with your kids in a studio apartment
Right.
than to have everybody have their own rooms, but they're exposed to constant conflict.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, think back on your own, your own childhood, your own situation. I'm sure many of us have divorced parents, as both Thomas and I do. And we moved around. I would say, I would say I moved a fair amount of times in my life, especially households, because my parents uh didn't own a home after I was about 11. They didn't own a home the rest of my life, so we were in rentals. So we moved around a little, although it was within the same general area and all that kind of stuff. But when I look back on my parents getting divorced and things, what comes to my mind? I think about their conflict. I think about their fighting. I think
Right.
about how it impacted me. I don't think, oh, what house were we living in when that happened?
Yeah, when
I don't, that doesn't even come into my
when my
mind.
dad smacked my mom.
Yeah, I mean, if you asked me to think about it, I could come up with where we were living, if I
Let's see,
needed
where
to.
was
But
that?
that wasn't the impact.
Yeah.
The impact was one of them asking me, if I think my dad asked me something along the lines of, well, didn't I want them, well, don't you, I was a little bit older teenager, and I think he said something like, well, don't you prefer that your mom and I be together? And my answer to him was, I prefer that you both be happy.
Right.
Which did not set well with him, which I understand at this stage of my life, and I look back on that, I understand. But at 16, 17 years old, that was all I wanted. And they had had many years of constant fighting and conflict, and I'm an only child, and I was exposed to a lot of that. And so that's a lot of my memory. I don't look back and think about where we lived or what kind of car we had or any of that kind
So that explains all the craziness.
of there you go.
I'm just kidding.
Now you know what happened to me. So
Yeah, yeah, and children are resilient,
right.
in that way, but it's hard to overcome. Like, for example, um, I've seen these couples that will have these heated arguments, and they're holding their children.
Oh yeah.
They're holding their children in their arms, and they are saying the most cutting things to the other person. And believe me, even if you have a child that's pre-language, that's going to do some damage.
Yes. Yeah. Even, I mean, a lot of people think, oh, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 months, they don't know what we're saying,
Yeah.
or they'll say nasty things, but they'll say it in this little nice little tone to where, they
Yeah.
think the baby doesn't understand. But
Yeah.
the
If it's
thing
in
you-
baby talk, it's still hostility.
the thing you can't hide
Yeah.
is your feelings.
Yeah.
And a baby is very sensitive to that,
Right.
Right.
And the developmental, if you have young children like toddlers and before,
Mhm.
the main developmental task of that child, aside from exploring their world, is to learn connection.
Right.
And I've seen over and over, and I saw this in my niece had this problem. She had, it's a long story, but she was fostered by another, my other sister.
Right.
And she had very serious connection issues,
Right.
or bonding issues.
Right.
What's the word? They say
Attachment disorder.
attachment disorder. Thank you.
Right. I'm not a therapist,
I know,
but
she's
I
not
play
a
one
ther-
on TV. So
That's right. And you could see it because she would have these strange reactions where we take her to the beach, and she would make friends with somebody at the beach, a total stranger, and then she would cry when that person had to leave.
right.
So
Right.
yeah, that child, and that child is, in her 30s now,
Right.
and she really is having some.
I don't think she's quite 30, but
I think she is.
might be mad at you if she hears that. I don't think
Well,
so.
I don't think. Hopefully, she won't have to hear it. She's a
She's
good
not
kid.
quite 30. She's in her
But-
late 20s.
But she has hard time with relationships.
Yeah.
Because healthy relationships were not modeled to her in infancy and childhood.
Right.
And I think that she was prevented from, or she was wrested away from a primary caretaker. And, sometimes that's necessary, but it can be very harmful.
Right. Well, and I mean, honestly, for a lot of people, conflict resolution wasn't modeled in a healthy way in the home they grew up in. It wasn't modeled in a healthy way in the home I grew up in. You know,
Right.
I've shared my dad would go very long periods of time without speaking to my mother when he was angry, sometimes not speaking to me either. If I was in my teenage years when I was kind of tighter with my mom in some ways, and you know, I was kind of guilt by association and things like that. You know, things that, I mean, you know, I think my dad is, you know, regretful of now that he's older and more patient and doesn't do those things. But
Right.
you know, at the time, you know, he was a young man and that was just his way of dealing with the conflict because of what was modeled for him.
Right.
You know, so we all have this. And so, really, you know, when you're kind of, you know, getting back to like the title of what we named this, when you're chasing these perfect outcomes, you know, in the name of stability for your child or in the name of, um, you know, not disrupting them or not causing them issues, honestly, you're looking at the wrong things because you're looking at more the physical components of their world and you're not looking at the emotional components of their world, which is what is going to be one of the main determining factors in
Mhm.
their future success and happiness. I mean,
Yeah.
I think with all the people that we deal with, one of the biggest things we see is many people going through divorce have low emotional intelligence.
Yeah. It's like some of the cases that are the nastiest are the very people that see themselves as really healthy, right? I'm enlightened, so I mean, other people have been unable to make this co-parenting thing work and are unable to be friends after divorce, but that's not me. I can do it. And though when you set up that expectation, really, yeah, you're denying your own feelings
That's right. And the feelings of the other person.
and the feelings of the other person.
And most of the time at some point one of the people get tired of what's the word? Like faking it, I guess, or
Right.
whatever, or swallowing
Well,
their
if they have any emotional intelligence, they do. Yeah.
right. I mean, well, I think what happens is people get tired of swallowing it, right?
Yeah.
It's like you're trying to be nice and do all these things, but there's nowhere for the anger to really go.
Mhm.
And you end up, you know, I have this kind of case sort of right now. I'm coaching one of the parties, and it's very similar to that. It's like they both went into this going, we're going to keep everything joined. We've got a business, we've got homes. We're not going to disrupt all this. You know, the kids are, you know, going to be free to go between the homes and the parents, and we're all just we're going to have holidays together still, and we're going to do all these things, and we're not going to be, you know, I mean, my client has said to me multiple times, you know, we decided we weren't going to be one of those people.
Right.
You know, we weren't going to do it like that. We were going to, you know, put our kids first and put our emotions aside. And now, you know, fast forward, you
We're
know,
going to put our emotions aside.
yeah. And fast forward a few years.
We're just
and
going to stuff them down.
right. And fast forward a few years and, you know, it's all just crumbling. And
Yeah.
she says, I can't believe we've become these people. Like, I just can't even
Right.
fathom that we've become these people because now everything is causing problems for our kids.
Right. And part of like one of the core precepts of Tammy and my philosophy is that when you get a divorce, or even if you're an unmarried parent, if you're breaking up with your girlfriend or your boyfriend, and you're choosing to live separately, you're getting a divorce.
Right.
And that means that you no longer share your feelings, and you're no longer intimate with this person.
Right.
And when you try to be, you try to back the relationship up to a prior level of intimacy, what you end up doing is creating an impossible situation and creating a situation where you have conflict.
Right. Right. And, you know, we all want, I think as parents, it's pretty universal that, you know, 99% of parents want what's best for their kids. You know, you don't always
Yeah.
agree. I don't, you know, what I
Some
think
people
is-
hate their kids,
Well,
but not very many.
not very many.
Yeah.
But what I think is some people are selfish and put themselves first, right?
Yeah.
And aren't looking out for their kids. But
Right.
what I think is best for my kids is different than what you think is best for your kids, or different than what, you know, Thomas thinks is best for his kids, or his ex-wife thinks is best for the kids, or whatever. We've all got our own ideas about what is best for our own children. But I think the problem is we're trying to have we believe we can have the best of both worlds. Exactly, going back to what Judge Brannigan said to you
Right.
is there is not no such thing as no consequence divorce.
That's
And
true.
I think as parents we get very focused on the negative impact to our kids, which is, things like, oh, I'm worried about their stability, I'm worried about disrupting them, I'm worried about them seeing conflict. I'm worried about them having to deal with the emotional difficulties of going between two homes. I'm worried that they're going to feel put in the middle of their parents. I'm worried, all this list of things. But nobody sits down and says, wow, I'm going through this really negative situation, but what things can I use to positively impact my child's experience in this?
Yeah.
What can they learn? They can learn to be more resilient.
Correct.
They can learn conflict resolution.
Correct. Yes.
They can learn
They
to
can learn mature behavior between adults.
they can learn to care about somebody else's feelings without having to be responsible for them.
Yeah, that's a good point.
There's all kinds of positive things. They can learn cooperation, even with somebody you don't like, right? I mean, your ex is not your favorite person, but you can model cooperation with them. Then your children learn, okay, I don't like this person, or I have this boss I don't like, or this coworker I don't like, or whoever. But you know what? I can figure out how to
Right.
get along with them.
Or you can do a podcast together. I'm just kidding, Tammy. I'm just kidding.
Well, it's better if you don't like the person, then you have a lot of conflicting things to
Right.
talk about, right?
So, well,
That went right over your head.
It did. I was thinking what I was going to say next.
Yeah.
That's all right. You don't have to repeat it. So you can have an ideal situation. We're talking about perfectionism.
Right.
And you can have an ideal situation where you have high cooperation and you have unity with respect to the child and house rules and the same values. What is that called? Staying together.
Yeah.
That's called staying together. So, and if you're there, look, why not get a marital therapist, find somebody who specializes in problem solving, because the kind of therapy that tries to fix you and go back into your childhood is not going to work.
It's not going to work fast enough.
Yeah, you need to learn how to live together without conflict,
Right.
and all those things. And you have to build intimacy with each other, and that does model healthiness to the child. But stay together and fix what's wrong with your marriage.
Right. And if you can't do that, then recognize
Absolutely.
that there's that what what you have after that is going to be some form of difficulty for the child. That's just how it is. Child's going to go back and forth between two homes. There's not a lot you can do about that. You won't be able to control the other parent's world, and that just has to be what it is. And what you have to do is take your world, make it as stable as you can, create, model good behaviors, model good lessons, be the stable parent. And then what will happen is your child will learn some great lessons from that. And, is the other parent a jerk, or is the other parent doing, things you'd prefer they not do or whatever? Probably, but you can't control that.
Right.
And there's nothing you can do. I mean, the parental rights are constitutional, so pretty much the court is going to support a parent's interaction with the child, even if it has to be supervised. That's pretty much the very least we see a court do, is either supervised or therapeutic visitation.
Right.
Court almost never says this parent should not see the children at all.
Right.
Like, that's extremely rare.
I think I've seen it one time.
Yeah. I mean, maybe if you have somebody in prison or something like really, really severe.
Right.
But that's pretty unusual. For the vast majority of us, the truth of the matter is we're dealing with the other parent. And so, is it going to be perfect for your child? No. But here's the thing. Even you staying together, even though that's the most ideal in for most children, I think, even that wouldn't have been perfect, right? Even that, I mean, you have conflict. Even that, you have, things that happen that, the child sees or hears or whatever that you prefer they not.
Yeah, and sometimes we do immature things.
Right.
Sometimes we're sarcastic and we escalate conflict, and we do all the things that our therapist tells us not to do.
Yeah. All the things that we know we shouldn't do that
That's
we do
right.
anyway.
I mean, except for you and me, Tammy. We never do anything like
Yeah,
that,
no,
do
we
we?
never fight. We don't have fights at all, ever.
Right. So,
All right. So we hope our discussion today is helpful to help you kind of, reframe and rethink some of this. It's a difficult process. Our prayers are with you if you're going through it for sure. But if you're listening to the podcast, don't forget to rate and review us wherever you're listening, and to subscribe so you get notified as new episodes are released each week. And if you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to hit the like button and also subscribe to our channel so you get notified as new videos are released each week. And we will see you soon.
see you then.
Thank you for listening to the Divorce University online podcast with your hosts, Thomas and Tammy Ferreira. For more information, visit www.divorceuniversityonline.com.